The morning air in Montana was sharp and clear, the kind that cut through the lungs and made a man feel alive if he still had reason to. Sergeant Walt Hayes, age 68, stood on the porch of his small wooden cabin, a cup of black coffee steaming in his calloused hand. His joints ached, his back stiffened more each winter, but his eyes, cold gray and steady, hadn't dulled one bit. They were still the eyes of a Marine sniper who once saw too far and too much. Inside, leaning against the wall beside the fireplace, rested a rifle that seemed out of place in the modern world. Its metal was scratched, its scope a relic from another era, and its wooden body was painted a strange, weathered orange. That rifle had been through jungles, monsoons, and fire. It had seen more than most men ever would, and it was all he had left from the days when the world called him one of the best. Down the hill, the old dirt road buzzed with the sound of engines. A convoy of shiny Humvees rolled toward the open training range just beyond town. A banner flapped in the wind. Marines, Veterans, Appreciation, and Live Fire Day. It was meant to honor the old warriors, though everyone knew it was mostly for sore recruitment videos, photo ops, and good publicity for the base. Still, something in Walt stirred when he saw the banner. He hadn't set foot on a Marine range in 20 years. Maybe it was time. He arrived at the base with the orange rifle slung across his back. Young Marines glanced his way, some nodding politely, most trying not to laugh. One of them, a tall, muscular sniper instructor, with a perfect buzz cut, grinned and whispered loudly to his friends. "Hey, check it out." The old man brought a traffic cone rifle. Laughter rippled through the group. Walt said nothing. He simply smiled and nodded. He'd seen boys like that before, full of pride, not yet humbled by life or war. His silence unnerved them more than any insult could. The crowd gathered for the shooting competition. Modern rifles gleamed under the sun-sleek carbon fiber, laser rangefinders, digital scopes. Walt's weapon looked like a museum piece among them. A few older veterans recognized him and clapped him on the back, murmuring his name with respect. But most of the young ones didn't know who he was, or what he'd done. At the registration table, Lieutenant Brandon Cross, the same cocky instructor, smirked. "Sir, this isn't a history exhibit," he said. "You sure that thing even fires?" Walt looked at him, calm as a stone. "Son," he said softly, "this rifle's been firing since before your daddy learned to walk." Cross scoffed. "Good luck, Grandpa." As Walt took his place on the range, the laughter behind him faded into the wind. He lay prone, the orange rifle resting steady in his hands, his breath slow and measured. For the first time in years, the world around him grew quiet and the Marine in him woke up again. The morning sun rose higher, burning away the mist that lingered over the shooting range. Walt lay still behind his orange rifle, his heartbeat syncing with the rhythm of the wind. The distant chatter of Marines and the occasional burst of laughter faded as he focused down the scope. But even as he stared through the glass, his mind drifted back to another time. Another jungle, where the air was thick with heat and death. He had been 21 in Vietnam, a sniper in the 3rd Marine Division. Back then, his eyes were just as sharp, but his soul was still untouched by the kind of loss that leaves a man hollow. He and Sergeant Don Avery were brothers in everything but blood to men who trusted each other with their lives. They shared cigarettes, stories, and the kind of silence only soldiers understand. Until that day, their unit had been sent into a dense valley near Da Nang. Command told them the area was clear. It wasn't. The ambush came fast, too precise. Someone in command had sold them out, fed their position to the enemy for a few ounces of gold. Walt still remembered the whistling sound of incoming shells, the deafening roar that tore the earth apart. When the smoke cleared, half his platoon was gone. Don lay beside him, bleeding out, one hand gripping Walt's rifle. "Make it count," Don had whispered, his blood running down the orange stock. "Don't let them forget us." After that, Walt painted the rifle orange bright in defiance so he'd never forget the day his brothers fell, the day his trust died. He carried that rifle through 2 more tours. Each shot he fired a prayer for the fallen, and when the war ended, he came home to a world that no longer had room for men like him. Back on the Montana range, the echo of the past still clung to him. The young Marine's laughter brought back the sting of betrayal, different faces, same arrogance. They didn't know what it cost to stand behind a rifle like his. They didn't understand that every trigger pull came with a memory. He overheard a group nearby. "Man, that old-timer's gonna embarrass himself," one said. "Bet that thing jams before he even fires," another chuckled. Walt adjusted his scope, pretending not to hear. The orange paint glinted faintly under the sunlight, like a scar that never healed. A voice called out from the loudspeaker. "All right, Marines. Unofficial long-range challenge today. The steel plate at 4,000 meters. Anyone who hits it gets their name on the wall." A hush fell. 4,000 meters was nearly 2.5 miles. Most modern rifles couldn't even reach that far with accuracy. A few Marines scoffed. Some looked intrigued. Walt smiled faintly, his hands steady on the old rifle. He'd seen impossible shots before. He'd made a few of them himself. And as the wind brushed past his cheek, he whispered to the memory of Don Avery, "Looks like it has time to make it count again." the world seemed to hold its breath. The Montana wind whispered across the open valley, tugging at the flags and carrying the scent of dust and gunpowder. The range stretched endlessly barren earth, dry grass, and the faint shimmer of a steel plate glinting in the far distance. 4,000 meters. Walt Hayes lay prone, his elbows buried in the soil, the orange rifle nestled into his shoulder. Around him, a semicircle of Marines gathered, young, confident, and skeptical. Their modern rifles lay idle as they watched the old man with the relic weapon take his place on the mat. Lieutenant Brandon Cross folded his arms, smirking. "You sure about this, old-timer? That rifle looks like it came out of a museum?" Walt didn't look up. He checked the wind flag, then held out a pinch of sand, letting it drift. "The wind tells you more truth than any computer, son," he said quietly. Cross chuckled, shaking his head. "We'll see." The general himself had arrived to watch, drawn by curiosity and rumor. Word had spread quickly. Some old vets trying for the impossible shot. A spotter sat up beside Walt, uncertain. "Sir, no offense, but that rifle's effective range is half this distance. You'll be off by a mile." Walt simply smiled, one corner of his mouth twitching upward. "Then I'll just aim a mile to the right." A few laughs rippled through the crowd, but they were nervous laughs now, tinged with doubt. He looked through his scope. The orange rifle's glass was old and scratched, but to Walt, it was clearer than any digital lens. The world narrowed into a tunnel. Wind speed, distance, light refraction, humidity, all factors his mind calculated instinctively after decades of experience. He slowed his breathing until it matched his heartbeat. One breath in, one breath out. The echo of the past whispered in his ear. Don's voice. "Make it count." His finger rested gently on the trigger. The wind shifted slightly, he adjusted. He waited for that perfect stillness, the half-second of balance between chaos and calm. Then, the shot. A thunderclap cracked across the valley. The recoil kicked against his shoulder. The echo rolled through the hills, fading slowly. Everyone froze, watching, listening. Seconds stretched into eternity. Then, faint but undeniable clang. The sound carried through the distance like a ghostly bell. The spotter's jaw dropped. Impact confirmed. 4,000 meters. Direct hit. A wave of silence washed over the crowd. Even the wind seemed to stop moving. Lieutenant Cross stared, speechless. The general's eyes narrowed, then softened. He stepped forward, offering a slow, deliberate salute. "Sergeant Hayes," he said, his voice steady with respect. "You just broke a record no one thought possible." Walt rose slowly, his joints creaking, the orange rifle resting easily in his hands. "Records don't matter, General," he said softly. "Just proving a point." The general nodded. "And what point is that?" Walt glanced at the young Marines, their laughter gone, their pride replaced by awe. "That sometimes," he said, "the old ways still hit the mark." The valley fell into a stunned silence. Even the wind seemed to pause, as if acknowledging the impossible had just happened. Walt Hayes stood slowly, the orange rifle cradled in his arms like an old friend. The young Marines, who had moments ago mocked him, now stared with mouths agape and eyes wide, not with fear, but with newfound respect. Lieutenant Brandon Cross stepped forward, his confident swagger replaced by something heavier, humility, tinged with embarrassment. "Sergeant Hayes," he began, hesitating. I don't understand. How did you?" Walt held up a hand, gently stopping him. "It's not the rifle, Lieutenant. It's the man behind it. You can buy all the tech in the world, but it won't give you what experience, patience, and respect for your craft can." Cross swallowed, his pride deflating. Around him, the other Marines nodded silently, some shifting uncomfortably. They had been so sure of themselves, so certain the old veteran was a relic, a joke. Now they realized the weight of arrogance, the cost of underestimating a man who had lived 100 lives in one. The general approached a slow, deliberate stride. He studied Walt, taking in the stooped shoulders and lined face, then his unwavering eyes. "Sergeant," he said, voice low but carrying authority, "your aim is unmatched, but your lesson is greater. These men needed to learn that respect isn't given, it's earned, and you just taught them better than I ever could." Walt nodded once. "Thank you, sir. Just doing my duty." Later, as the crowd dispersed, the young Marines gathered near him, tentative but curious. Brandon Cross approached, offering a hand. I owe you an apology. We were wrong. Not just about the rifle, about you." Walt shook his hand firmly, a glimmer of satisfaction in his eyes. "Good. Now remember it. A Marine earns respect, not by showing off, but by proving himself when it counts." The base soon returned to its routines, but Walt's shot became the story of the day, then the week, then the month. Everyone who had doubted him now whispered about the old veteran with the orange rifle, the man who hit a target no modern rifleman could touch. That evening, back at his cabin, Walt cleaned the orange rifle with meticulous care. The scratches in the wood and the worn metal told a story of decades of war, loss, and survival. He ran his hands along its length, whispering softly. They laughed. "Brother, but you heard that shot, didn't you?" He placed the rifle carefully on a shelf above the fireplace, surrounded by faded photographs and medals, each piece a memory of comrades lost, battles survived.